All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to look at a kind of map of the near future, one that's been drawn by over 900 of the world's leading experts. We are breaking down the World Economic Forum's latest global risks report to really get a handle on the biggest dangers coming our way.
So first up, what's the general vibe out there? Well, to put it mildly, it is pretty pessimistic. When you look at just the next 2 years, a whopping 94% of these experts are bracing for things to be unsettled, turbulent, or even stormy. Just a tiny fraction see calm or stability ahead. So this isn't just a little bit of worry, it's a near unanimous feeling that we're heading into some really choppy waters.
And this quote from the forum's managing director really just nails that feeling of tension. In a world this on edge, one wrong move, one miscalculation could have absolutely massive consequences. So, okay, if the forecast is stormy, what are the actual storm clouds we should be watching out for? What are the biggest risks?
We'll start with what the report calls a world on edge. These are the immediate dangers, the crises that are keeping leaders up at night, right this very minute. So what's at the top of that list?
We'll get this. For the second year in a row, the number one short-term threat isn't a weapon. It isn't a natural disaster. It's the weaponization of information itself. The spread of fake and misleading stuff, supercharged by all these new AI technologies, is seen as the single most severe risk we face in the next 2 years. It's the kind of threat that just poisons everything else, from our elections to public health.
And when you look at this whole list, it's a really complex cocktail of threats, isn't it? You've got the digital dangers like misinformation. You've got environmental shocks from extreme weather. You have social fractures from polarization. And then that constant background noise of geopolitical tension, cyber attacks, and actual real-world conflict. It's just an incredibly tricky landscape to navigate.
Okay, so that's the here and now. That's what we're facing in the next couple of years. But here's where things get really interesting, maybe even a little startling. It's when the experts shift their focus and look further out, to the next decade. When they do that, the entire risk landscape just completely transforms. And this slide right here just lays it all out. Check this out. In the short term, our biggest fears are all about human conflicts and divisions. But fast forward 10 years, and all of a sudden, 4 of the top 5 most severe risks are environmental. Things like societal polarization and state conflict, they get pushed way down the list, and they're replaced by these fundamental threats to the stability of our planet. And let's be super clear about this. The top 3 most severe risks over the next decade are all environmental. And we're not just talking about, a few more bad storms here and there. We're talking about the risk of fundamental, critical changes to Earth systems and the potential collapse of entire ecosystems. It's a really powerful consensus among these global experts. And if you want a perfect example of just how dramatic this shift is, look at the risk of biodiversity loss. Right now, today, it's ranked way down at number 20 on the worry list. But in the 10-year outlook, it skyrockets 17 places to become the 3rd most severe global risk. It's a textbook example of a crisis that's kind of brewing under the surface today, but is expected to just erupt within the next decade. And it's not just the environmental risks making these huge leaps. The threat from adverse outcomes of AI technologies, well, that jumps from a pretty low 29th in the short term all the way up to 6th place in the long term. That is a massive jump. It tells us that the experts think we're just at the very, very beginning of figuring out what AI could really mean for us, both the good and the potentially very bad.
So what's driving all this? Why the dramatic shift from today's conflicts to tomorrow's crises? Well, this change doesn't just happen on its own. The report points to 4 really big underlying forces that are basically pulling the strings and reshaping our world. You can think of these 4 things as the tectonic plates of global risk. They are the huge, deep movements that are shaping everything else. You've got ongoing climate change, the insane acceleration of technology, big shifts in global power between countries, and this thing called demographic bifurcation, which is basically where some parts of the world have a huge youth population and others have a rapidly aging one. And this is the key, right? This is where you see how everything connects. Climate change is the engine driving that giant environmental crisis on the horizon. Technological acceleration is that double-edged sword that's fueling this information now and creating these unknown AI risks for later. And those geostrategic shifts, the changing power dynamics, they're what's fanning the flames of conflict and polarization that have us so worried today. So once you understand these big forces at play, it leads you to the million-dollar question of the whole report. We have a pretty clear map of the dangers ahead, but the real question is, can we act in time? And maybe more importantly, can we act together? And here's the kicker, the real challenge.
A whopping 2/3 of these experts believe that over the next 10 years, the world will actually become more fragmented and contested, not more cooperative. They see a future where different powers are competing, which makes the kind of global teamwork you need to tackle huge problems like climate change much, much harder to pull off. And yet, despite that pretty gloomy forecast about cooperation, the report's conclusion couldn't be clearer. The only way through these massive shared risks is by working together. As Sadia Zahidi puts it, there is simply no other viable option.
So this brings us right to the heart of the matter, this central paradox that the report leaves us all wrestling with.
And that's really the paradox that sits at the very heart of this report, isn't it? The long-term threats we face are global, they're all connected, and they demand a level of cooperation we've maybe never seen before. And yet the short-term reality is a world that seems to be pulling itself apart. So the question this explainer leaves us with is a stark one. In a world growing more divided, where on earth is the leadership going to come from to solve our shared crises?